Hello, everybody. This is Ellen Weatherford. I'm here again with just the zoo of us. This is your favorite animal review podcast. And this week, I have a new friend who is joining us. This is Keriann McGoogan. Say hello to our friends, Keriann.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Ellen. Thanks for having me. This is really exciting.
I am so excited to talk to you. I'm excited about our animal today. But before we get into that, introduce us a little bit to yourself and your work and what you do.
Sure. So I am by, background and training. I'm a primate researcher. So that means that I am trained to study primates in the wild. So you might be wondering how I came to kind of get to that space because it's a bit unusual. But I actually started off as an English major when I took my undergraduate degree. And then I ended up taking an optional course that was called Introduction to Biological Anthropology. And I had a really, really engaging course instructor who actually worked as the head of conservation at the Calgary Zoo in Alberta, Canada, where I'm from. And so he was so inspiring. Like he showed a lot of videos and gave us a lot of really cool insights about his work and his background in conservation. And his travels. And so I ended up switching from English into anthropology. And then I took my Bachelor of Science and then my master's degree, where I ended up going to Belize to study wild howler monkeys for a few months because there was a big devastating hurricane there. So I studied the impact of that hurricane on that population. And then I ended up doing my PhD on lemurs. So I switched species. And I ended up going to the University of Toronto to study lemurs in the wild in Madagascar. And so I spent 14 months living in Madagascar studying Coquerel sifakas in the wild. And, I got to basically chase lemurs through the forest all day, every day for like 14 hours a day.
That sounds awesome, but so tiring.
Yeah, it was exhausting. So I'll probably get to this later, but yeah, they were well equipped to move through the forest, and I was not as equipped to chase after them as quickly as I needed to. But it was a lot of fun. I spent days with them, and had a lot of lemur picnics and things like that along the way.
What is a lemur picnic?
Okay. So yeah. So because I was spending the whole day out with the lemurs, that meant that I would get up at 5 a.m, find the group, and then I would stay with them the whole day, kind of tracking where they went and what they ate and how they moved and what they did. But that meant I was out there for lunch, so I would always bring some lunch with me, and so that would be like toast or like cheese. And just little bits of things like that. And a few times, there's one day in particular where it was really hot, and the lemurs would rest during the hot periods of the day. So they actually started coming lower and lower to the ground to get more shade area. And so they moved low, and then they actually moved directly onto the ground. And it was right about my lunchtime. So I pulled out my snacks, and, there you have it. It was a lemur picnic.
I love that. That sounds so cute. How close were they comfortable getting to you?
By the end, pretty comfortable. So part of being a lemur researcher involves habituating the primates. And so that meant the first few weeks to month of the field work involves kind of just spending the time with them just so they get used to human presence. Because some groups were, it was actually a tourist site where I worked. So they were pretty used to humans, but some groups weren't as used to humans kind of following them around all day. So yeah, you'd spend some time with them just to get them used to your presence. So by that time I had that lemur picnic, they didn't care that I was there at all. So they were, I would say maybe 2 meters or so away from me. So yeah, and right on the ground. So really, really close.
Oh my gosh, I would have been losing it. Were you losing it?
Yeah, it was pretty, like, my heart was racing. And yeah, like that's one of the more memorable moments that I had with the lemurs when I was there for that 14 months, was that day in particular. Like that's one that I always talk about.
I could see why. So, we're talking about lemurs, which are like primates that live in Madagascar. And then you mentioned that we're talking about sifakas today. So is there a difference between lemurs and sifakas? Like, what's that term about?
So a sifaka is a type of lemur. So the species that I studied was called Coquerel sifakas. And they get that name based on the sound that they make. They kind of make this almost like a sneezing sound. I can't even begin to try to emulate it, but it's sort of like shifaka is like what the sound that they kind of make. It sort of sounds like a little bit of a sneeze. Yeah, so they're a type of lemur. There's 111 different species and subspecies of lemur. And so that's one type.
Okay. Are all lemurs in Madagascar or are there lemurs elsewhere?
No, so that's what makes lemurs so special is that they're only found in Madagascar and nowhere else on the planet. So we call that, like in the scientific community, the name for that is endemic. And so that is, yeah, that means they're only found there and nowhere else.
And there's 111 of them on this. Is Madagascar called an island? I know they're really big. Do you still call it an island at that size?
Yep, so it's actually the fourth largest island in the world after Greenland, New Guinea, and Borneo. So it's a big island. It's about the size of Texas in terms of size. So it's quite big, which means there's a lot of different habitat types. And that's why there's so many different species of lemur because they're all like adapted to living in different areas on that island.
Okay, okay. I'm gonna take your cue and say Shifaka instead of Sifaka, like I have been. But so with these Shifakas, these are the ones that are probably the most familiar to people listening because we've seen them on TV, yes?
Yeah, so the species that I studied, Coquerel shifaka, is the boomafu. So I don't know if that's the what you're referring to, but that's probably the most famous children's television show because they live also in the Duke Lemur Center, and that's where they filmed a lot of the animals in Zabumafu, and obviously Zabumafu was a puppet as well.
Yeah, they had like it was really interesting. They would like transition between having like the puppet that was talking and then they would switch over to like footage of an actual real life like Shifaka that was moving around. But so yeah, when I see one, it's very instantly recognizable as like that's Sabumafu, which is really exciting to me because that show was out right at the time when I was in the perfect age group for it. I was like 5, 6 years old. So like it definitely I see him and I just get this warm fuzzy feeling. I'm like, I learned so much from you.
I know. I'm hoping they bring something back similar to that because there's like I think you're the prime demographic for Zabumafu, and now it's the kids don't know it as much. So I'd like to bring that back. Like maybe we can get some retro action going, or hopefully they'll make another show.
Yeah, they're not monkeys, right? They resemble monkeys, but they're not, right?
Right. So they're their own group, which we call the strepsirrhines. Monkeys are different. So there's different characteristics that sort of distinguish lemurs from monkeys. There's no monkeys found in Madagascar, for example, and then physical traits as well. So like monkeys have these prehensile tails, some of them. So that means they have tails that can grasp onto objects, almost like another limb. But none of the lemurs have that. They just have kind of a run-of-the-mill tail, I suppose. But they're still pretty cool.
But it's still long, right? It's like the long, bushy tail. That's what I think of. I think of like the fluffy, like tail with the rings on it.
Yeah, so that's a ring-tailed lemur. Yeah, they have the fluffy, like ringed tail, and then the shifakas they have plain white, or depending on the different colorations, because there's more than one type of shifaka in Madagascar. But yeah, so the tail and then also differences in their teeth and like the way that their skull is shaped and things like that distinguishes them from the monkeys.
I like them so much. We have them at our zoo and it's always really fun because like when you go up to their exhibit, it's at ground level and there's just like glass between you and the lemurs and they are so curious. Like they'll come right up to the glass where you are and they're like looking back at you and they're curious about you too. So like they'll come right up and look like, what are you doing? Were they like that with you in the wild?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I like you're doing the little head motion, and that's exactly what they did. So they actually would cock their head, almost like a dog waiting for a treat. Like they'll just give a little like cock of the head because they'd be very curious. In particular, because at the site where I worked, there was actually 8 different species of lemur. So it wasn't just the shifakas, but there was also the brown lemur, and the brown lemurs were especially curious. They would often wake us up because they would be bouncing around like the trees above our tent and making these sounds almost like grunting sounds. It sounds like almost like a group of pigs. And then we'd unzip our tents And they would be up in the trees, and they'd give us the little head tilt to when we emerged from our tent, just curious.
So now that we have a good overview of what we're talking about today, we're talking about these sifakas. Let's get into our ratings a little bit for these animals, which is our thing that we do. If this is your first time listening to this particular podcast, we review our animals and we rate them out of 10. And our first category is effectiveness, which for us is physical adaptations, things that are built into the animal's body, things that are like physiological that let the animal do a good job of the things it's trying to do, whether that is evading predators, defending themselves, catching prey, like whatever it is that they're trying to do, things about their body that make them good at doing that. What would you give Coquerel's Sifaka for effectiveness?
Oh, okay. So I think I would give it a 9.
That's pretty good.
It's a pretty good score, yeah. And I'll tell you why I knocked off a point in a minute. But yeah, I can give you a little context as to why I think they're so effective. So the first thing that I think is the most effective about their adaptation, their physical adaptations, is their locomotion style. So they actually engage in what we call vertical clinging and leaping. And that basically involves they kind of hug onto a vertical substrate like a tree trunk. And then they are able to then propel themselves through the air, kind of do a 180 flip through the air, and then grab onto the next vertical substrate. And the reason why they can do that is they have these really long hind limbs. And they're actually really, really well adapted to kind of spring themselves and propel themselves off into the air like that. And so they can move in one leap. They can take about, a 10-meter leap just in one of their kind of steps through the forest. And they've been described as taking these big ballet leaps through the top of the canopy, and they move silently. Like it's really fascinating to watch because they'll jump and then they'll just like do another jump, and like they're off like way off in the distance in just a few steps.
I'm seeing why it was so hard for you to chase after them.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, right? Is they would move so quickly and seamlessly through the air that a few steps for them was, way off in the distance. And then I would have to follow them along the ground. And there's all these like bushes and like vines and lianas that I'm trying to charge through. There's spiky things that I'm trying to avoid and step over. And so it wasn't easy, but I did learn at the end of my research that I figured out where they were going. And so, because I knew what trees were fruiting and what they wanted to eat. And so if I saw them go in a particular direction, I would deke out into the trail and just take a shortcut along a trail, meet them at the tree.
That is working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I did that at the end. But yeah, they were just so well adapted. The other thing that they have are these finger pads. So when they would actually jump through the forest and land, those pads would actually help them stick onto the branches as well. So that also contributed to their ability to move in that way and to move so effectively through the trees.
Wow. Is it like a textured pad, or like what is it about the pad that lets it like grab on?
Yeah, it's just like a pad on the top of their fingertips that gives them a little bit more traction, I guess. Yeah, so it's got a bit more I don't know, cushion, and then yeah, it makes it easier for them to move through the trees.
That's really cool.
Yeah, but okay, so then here's the reason why I took off a point, because the problem is, so they're seamlessly moving through the canopy, but when you put them on the ground, it gets a little bit more awkward. So the Coquerel Sifaka is actually, when they move on the ground, they're so well adapted to living in the trees. They have these like hind limbs that are really powerful, and they're kind of bow shaped. But when they're on the ground, they can't move the way that we do. So they actually do this really funny bipedal hop / shuffle that my partner always describes as like a kangaroo doing kung fu. So they're like moving, like hopping and shuffling along the ground. And it's super, super cool to see, but it's a little bit awkward. So they're not quite adapted to move on the ground. But the problem, I debated whether or not to take a point off, because the reason why they have to cross gaps through the forest is that some of the forest has been cut down, or there might be gaps because of human actions. And so it's not really their fault that they have to kind of cross those gaps, and that they do it awkwardly. Also, it looks pretty cool when you see them do it.
So other than these human created gaps in the forest, is there any other reason why they would ever need to come down to the ground, or would they otherwise just be up in the trees 24/7?
I think they would often, like I said, they came down when they were trying to get some shade when it was hot. So they would do that. They would often come down to the ground. They would actually eat bark as well. Like they'd eat the bark off of trees. So they would come down low to do that. There'd be times that they would just come down and do that normally as well. I mean, most of the time it was to cross a gap, like because of either a trail or there was a clearing in the forest and they were trying to get to the other side or something like that.
Okay, that makes sense. When you mentioned that they eat bark, that made me realize I haven't asked you yet. What do they eat? Are they are they hunting things, or are they like foraging for vegetation? Like what does their diet look like?
Yeah, so they are vegetarians. They eat leaves and fruit and bark. That's their main diet. Yeah, mostly like it depends on the season. Like when it was wet season, they would really, really go hard on the fruit because fruit is a higher quality food source. So it gives more energy and things like that. So that's when they really love to eat the fruit. But if there wasn't fruit, they would be okay to eat leaves as well.
Does anything hunt them? Like what do they have to be worried about?
Yeah, so they do have predators. Their main predators are the fossa. So I don't know if anyone has seen that Disney cartoon Madagascar. So that was sort of like the villain in that movie. So it's sort of a cat-like creature that lives on the ground and hunts lemurs. And then the other thing they have to worry about for the younger lemurs and the smaller lemurs are aerial predators. So raptors, for example. And then the other main threat is, unfortunately, is humans.
Do people hunt them for things?
Yeah. So the biggest threats to lemurs are habitat loss, hunting, and the pet trade. So people do hunt lemurs mainly for food, mainly a subsistence type of hunting that's problematic.
I could see that. When you were describing like how difficult it can be to keep up with them, I'm not thinking this is an animal I would want to have in my house.
No, that's the other thing. Yeah, they don't make good pets, I would say, like most primates, because they're so smart and yeah, they're not a domesticated animal. So yeah, you wouldn't want them bouncing around your house like that. No.
No, thank you. So when it comes to these, they've got fossas on the ground, which by the way, I've been pronouncing fossa my whole life, so I apologize retroactively for that.
Well, yeah, so all the O's in Malagasy words are pronounced oo. So that's
Okay.
the trick. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to remember that. So they've got fossas on the ground, raptors in the air. Is it just like evasion that they're dealing with to get away from these predators? Do they have like anything that they can use to get away, like to defend themselves, or are they just kind of making a run for it?
Most of I guess the way that they can evade those predators is through behavioral action. So they actually really rely on vocalizations to kind of alert each other to the presence of those predators. So they have this, so that's when you kind of hear the characteristic Sifaka vocalizations. They'll start doing that and they'll kind of like thrust their head backwards almost towards the sky and usually that when they do that there's an aerial predator in the area or some kind of aerial threat that they're worried about, so they will make those noises and then the rest of the group knows, kind of keep an eye out, and they'll move a little bit lower down in the tree oftentimes when they do that as well.
Okay, that is a really good transition into our second category, which is ingenuity. This is behavioral adaptations that the animal has. So these are things that it's doing with its body to solve problems that it faces in its life. So what would you give this Sifaka for ingenuity?
So I would give the Sifakas, I think I would give them an 8 or a 9, like again, pretty high, because I think like most primates, like they're pretty smart and they're pretty well adapted, especially behaviorally, to respond to things that are happening around them. So one example, like we just talked about, is predator evasion. So with making that call, but they used calls for other things. Like one of the things that would happen a lot when I was following the group is sometimes the group would actually get split up. So they'd lose a few members of the group. So I'd always stay with the majority. So like I'd be with 3 of them, but like 2 of the stragglers just hadn't quite made it to where they were. And what they would do is they would make this like cooing sound, like almost like a whoo. And then
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
I know. They would do that, but they would do that because then they would hear each other and find each other. So you just hear this like kind of like cooing coming from like way off in the distance behind you, and then they would rejoin the group. So doing that, I think, was really smart, and it goes to show too just how social these lemurs are, because that was a way to kind of keep together as a group.
Is there any sort of structure to their social system? Do they have any sort of like hierarchy?
They are pretty structured in many ways. And my favorite way that they're structured is the fact that they are female dominant.
Live for it.
Exactly. So there's a joke that kind of goes around the lemur community, which is, so King Julian in Madagascar, that cartoon, should actually have been Queen Juliet, because all the lemurs, or many of the lemur species, are female dominant. And that is actually a really, I guess, if you're thinking about ingenuity, like that's a really well adapted behavior, because females need more resources and more food and energy to support childbirth. And so the fact that they're dominant means that they get more access to food. So that is really beneficial for keeping them healthy, and keeping them well during pregnancy and lactation and things like that.
Oh, that's so smart. So speaking of their parental care, what is the dynamic like between like the parents and the baby?
They do share that burden. So the babies, the infants in the group, would often be carried by other individuals who weren't the mother. So just because you saw, an infant being carried by an individual didn't mean that was the mother. So a lot of time, even the males would carry the infants. So yeah, they definitely shared that amongst the group, which is nice.
Oh, I love to see egalitarian parenting,
Yeah.
like in animals where you don't always see it. I really like to see like dad sticking around and
Exactly.
dad holding the babies, and it's always very sweet to me.
Yeah.
So when you were like working around them, or even in your work like outside of wild lemurs and wild sifakas, what is their capacity for like learning new things?
Yeah. So, I mean, all of my work was with wild sifakas. So I wasn't directly like doing kind of experimental work or anything where I could test how well they learned. I think a lot of researchers who work out of the Duke Lemur Center do that sort of thing, which is really cool. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know if I can speak to that necessarily. Like I do know, like, the infants would watch the parents, watch their mothers, and it seemed like they may have been picking up certain life skills that way. I'm almost certain that they were. But yeah, I mean, they don't, other primates are known to kind of use tools and things like that. And there's definitely direct evidence in the wild of infants watching the parent and emulating that behavior. But lemurs aren't necessarily, they don't use tools in the same way that other primates do. I mean, they did learn, it did seem like they had particular routes that they took through the forest. Part of my research involved tracking where they went and calculating like how big of the home range that they had, so that how big of the area of the forest did they use. And so they used particular routes, and it seemed like they kind of bounced from one tree to another in a very purposeful, directed way. Like they knew where they were headed, and they knew where certain trees were. So, for example, if there was a tree that was fruiting, they remembered where it was, and so they knew where to go. So that, I think, yeah, that demonstrates kind of a spatial awareness, a spatial intelligence.
Oh yeah, that's like way better. Like I don't remember how to get to places where I need to go every day. Like I need a GPS so often, so like they've got that up on me.
Yeah. The one rub, though, I would say, which happens from time to time because of cyclones that would kind of go through the area, certain trees would just get knocked down. And sometimes they were almost like too rigid in the route that they would take, because they'd go from one tree to the next tree. And then if that tree had been suddenly knocked down and wasn't in their route, they would still like jump, and then they'd leap, and it would almost be like they'd go through the air and they wouldn't.
Oh no.
There was nothing for them to grab onto because that tree had fallen. So a few times they actually fell down to the ground. They were okay. They would like jump right back up, but yeah, so I think maybe they need a little bit more flexibility in their ability to adapt their route.
That's just that muscle memory that sometimes you just, oh my gosh, that's a really funny mental image to
Mhm.
me. I'm glad they were okay. I would imagine that probably falling is a constant risk for them.
Yeah,
Are they usually okay? Like, is falling like a major threat to them, or are they usually fine?
they're usually fine. I've never seen an instance where they weren't fine. There was one memorable instance too where I was watching a group with a baby, and the group was resting, and the baby was kind of bouncing around as infants do. So it was sort of like jumping from person, from lemur to lemur, and branch to branch. And that infant actually fell down to the ground from like a significant height. Like it made kind of a thud, and that gave me a lot of anxiety. But what happened was the rest of the group descended to the ground and formed this little like lemur circle around the infant and collected the infant. One of them grabbed it and brought it back up to the tree. And a few minutes went by, and then it was fine. It was moving around, bouncing around again. But it was interesting because they all kind of went down and circled that lemur, probably to protect it from potential predators and just to make sure that it was okay.
Wow, I love that. Oh, it takes a village. They're so good. How many of them are typically living together in a group?
So, in the area where I worked, groups could be as small as two and as big as, I think the biggest group I had was eight or nine. So it was a pretty big range of group size.
Okay. I'm so pleased with the idea of them all like one of them gets hurt and all the other ones are like, "Oh, it's okay. We got your back. It's all right. We'll take care of you." I
Exactly.
love them.
Mhm.
That is a good transition into our next category, our last category. My favorite category, arguably, aesthetics,
Yeah.
which is just how nice this animal is to look at. So what do you give this Sifaka for aesthetics?
Well, it has to be a 10.
How could you
There's no
not?
there's no way around it.
They had to have put them on TV for a reason, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is an iconic species and like something that a lot of people like yourself like think about when they think about lemurs or about Madagascar is this species and the ring-tailed lemur are the two that are most well known. But yeah, I mean, they have one thing that really struck me when I saw them in the wild was just how snowy white they kept their fur. And I could never understand, like, for the longest time, I was like, how do they do that? Like, how do they keep, like, they're bouncing through the trees, they're, going on the ground. Like, how are they keeping their fur so white? And then I realized, of course, like, lemurs, like all lemur species, have what's called a tooth comb. So they have this specialized, like, canine and incisor grouping on the bottom of their jaw that's like actually meant for grooming. And so they would spend hours grooming each other, and that's how they obviously kept their fur so white.
Oh my gosh, what a flex. They're like showing off. They're like, look how clean I am. Yes, I have bright white fur. I can't think of how bright white fur would help them in like a jungle, right? If you're trying to like camouflage or blend in, the bright white can't be helping, right?
It wasn't good. Yeah, they weren't good camouflagers, no. But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like a hot forest where they work, like having a white fur probably does help with heat, perhaps. Like that's just a guess, but that could be. But yeah, I mean, they also had like maroon patches, and this is another thing kind of related to the aesthetics that I really love is they have these like maroon colorations along their arms and their legs that almost looks like they're wearing like an overcoat and trousers. So they're like, even though they have that white fur, they're very distinguished, I always thought.
They have really, really striking eyes too. I feel like all lemurs have eyes that just like when they look at you, they feel like they're so fixated on you. They are really staring directly into your soul.
Yeah, so they had this kind of like bluish, like in real life, like almost like bluish greenish, really just beautiful, gorgeous eyes.
How cute are the babies? I don't feel like I've seen a baby. How cute are they?
Oh, they're pretty cute, and it was so funny during the, I guess, birthing season. Like oftentimes I wouldn't see the baby for quite a while because they would cling on to the belly of the mother. And then all of a sudden I'd just like be looking with my binoculars and you'd see this little like black circle and I'd take a peek and it was the baby's face. But yeah, they're, I mean, imagine the Shifaka, but like really small and cute with a little like a little like wiry tail, like kind of bouncing around.
Oh man, it's so perfect. They have kind of this bright contrast, right, between like this white and then the black and dark maroon markings. Did that help you like find them in the jungle? I imagine it would.
Oh yeah, so that was like a big relief because I think I mentioned earlier I did my master's work in Belize, where I studied the howler monkeys. So the howler monkeys were totally black. So it was really, really hard to find them in the top of the trees because they looked like they would just blend right in. Like there'd be times that we knew they were there and you just couldn't see them because they just like looked like this dark spot. So I was really relieved to get to Madagascar where I would find the lemurs. And yeah, it's almost like birders have like the eye for birding. So once you kind of pick up that visual signal, it became really easy to find them if they were there. And oftentimes I would get there really early in the morning, so they'd still be sleeping and they'd be in this big clump that I used to call like a lemur ball. And so that was a lot of fun to find them. Yeah.
Does it get hot for them all being clumped up together? Like what is the purpose of the lemur ball?
Well, usually they would do that when it was cooler. So it wasn't always hot, especially in the mornings. In the dry season, it would actually be pretty cool. And, I lived there in a tent and I would get cold at night because we didn't have central heating or anything like that. So I think they would hunker down together in that lemur ball to stay warm.
They got a cuddle puddle.
Exactly.
Well, so I'm in love. I love this animal very much. Before we get wrapped up, since the week that this episode is going to be going up, it will be coming up on World Lemur Conservation Day. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the World Lemur Festival was, I think it started in 2014, so it's still relatively new. But the idea behind it is to really raise awareness about lemurs, because what a lot of people don't know is that lemurs are as we talked about, only found in Madagascar, nowhere else in the world. But they're also threatened with extinction. So a recent report came out actually just this summer that said that lemurs are the most endangered group of animals in the entire world. 98% of all of those 111 different species are threatened with extinction, and the Coquerel Sifaka is actually critically endangered. So a third of all the lemur species that exist are critically endangered, and unfortunately, Coquerel Sifaka is one of them. And so that's, like I mentioned before, because of, largely habitat loss, but also hunting and the pet trade. So those are the three big threats. So the idea behind the festival, there's events taking place all over the world. People can celebrate in many different ways, but the idea is to really raise awareness about these really special animals who are unfortunately facing, a lot of extinction threats as well.
So I got in touch with you through the Lemur Conservation Network. What kind of actions can people take to help? Like, what can people do to make things better?
So, I mean, it's tough because we're here and that's in Madagascar. So a lot of people wonder, what should I do? I think first and foremost, educate yourself. So learn more. And obviously, if you're listening to this, then you're interested. So that's great. So learn more about the lemurs, about what they do, about why they're threatened. I'm also a member of a nonprofit called Planet Madagascar. And so we work to save lemurs and other wildlife in Madagascar, but also to help people in Madagascar. So what we do is called community conservation. And so we work directly with the people there. A lot of the people in Madagascar, unfortunately, suffer from immense poverty. A lot of people are living on less than $2 a day. And a lot of them also don't know that the wildlife found in Madagascar is special and unique and only found there. So we, with my partner Travis Steffens, he started this conservation nonprofit where we work directly with local communities in Madagascar to help people and lemurs. So we have a number of different projects. One is a fire management program where we have hired local community members to patrol areas near the forest for fire and to note when that's happening, why it's happening, and also to look for lemurs, because fire is one of the biggest threats in the forests where we work as well. We also do a forest regeneration project where we're actually planting trees. So that's great because with habitat loss being one of the biggest threats to lemurs in Madagascar, what they really need most is more forest and forest being connected. So we're working to, we have a local women's cooperative working in one of our communities to grow plants that are then going to be transported to connect some of the bigger fragments in the forest.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that y'all are doing such good work. So I would encourage anybody listening who feels inspired to look y'all up. Can you give me that name one more time?
Yeah, so it's easy to remember. So we're Planet Madagascar. And the reason why we came up with that name is because Madagascar, we always say, is like a world in an island because there's so much unique biodiversity there. So planetmadagascar.org.
And where can people keep up with you? And are you working on any other projects right now that you want people to know about? How do you want people to follow up with you?
So I get to work on the side as a board member of Planet Madagascar, so you can find me through that. But I'm also a writer. So I mentioned I started out as an English major when I started my academic journey. So I've kind of come back to that, and I write about Madagascar. So I recently published a book called Chasing Lemurs, My Journey into the Heart of Madagascar. So people can find me on my website, KeriannMcGoogan.com, and it talks a little bit about the book there. There's a book trailer if you're interested to know more about what it's about. But that's another kind of avenue that I'm passionate about, and that's another way that people can educate themselves and learn about Madagascar, because the book is about the very first time that I went to Madagascar, which was when I was 25 years old. And that trip sort of didn't go as planned. There was a lot of misadventure along the way. And even though it didn't go as planned, though, Madagascar sort of stuck with me. And so it's also a love letter to this country, this beautiful country with amazing wildlife and wonderful people.
I feel like I especially would resonate with me because I am also 25 and would probably also be the type of person where things would not go as planned.
So there's a lot of, actually that trip ended in an emergency rescue mission. So that's that's the through line of the story. So we, I was going to set up a preliminary field site where I was going to go back for my longer PhD research, which was really, really remote. There was a lot of really hardships along the way to get there. And then we finally got there, and my field assistant got malaria. And so we actually had to evacuate unexpectedly. So that's the story. But, within that, it's also about the lemurs and the people and what I learned, becoming a field primate researcher as I was going through that journey in Madagascar.
Oh, awesome. That's a good resource for people who might feel inspired to follow in your footsteps in primate research.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Keriann, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. I have fallen in love with the Sifaka. It already had a nice place in my heart. It was already in a special place for me, but I'm so glad to have more context for that. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Of course. All right, we will talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.